Hello, and welcome to the Get Better podcast, the audio outlet that serves to help you identify, manage, understand, and hopefully overcome many of the challenges we face in our lives. We talk to people who are focused on getting us better, whether that be physical, emotional, or mental. Each week, we're going to talk to an expert in a given field and get their input and suggestions around getting better. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on the Get Better podcast. This week, we're going to talk to Jonathan Pritchard, the communication giant. He's going to talk to us about better ways of communicating, how to improve the way we talk to people, how to think about the reasons we do things, how to change some of the behaviors that we don't like about ourselves. And I don't want to give away the whole show, so I'm going to just get right to it. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Oster, and today I am very fortunate to be joined with Mr. Jonathan Pritchard. Jonathan is a professional communicator. He's a touring consultant, and he's also an author. What he does is he really helps companies connect with people. He has a very interesting experience. He sort of gives off the notion of being a mind reader, which I think is kind of novel and cool. But as I started to look into really what Jonathan was about, I found some very interesting things that I thought would really be applicable to this podcast, which is and surrounds itself with the idealism of self-improvement or getting better. So, Jonathan, I wanted to welcome you to the podcast and thank you for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
Might you tell us a little bit about yourself? What are some of the hurdles that you've personally faced in your life? How did you overcome them? And then how has that sort of played out into this professional life that you have today?
Oh, man, starting off with the struggles. All right. Let's see. I was married. I met my ex-wife. We both worked at Walt Disney World. So it was a magical time in my life. And then eventually I was unmarried. I've had my car repossessed twice, talked my way out of it both times, which was a huge achievement. So if you ever played like Dungeons and Dragons, I guess my verbal skill would be maxed out, right? Convincing people to, you know what, you don't want to repossess my car because you know what, you can make more money off of me if you just tack on the extra charges and put that on the end of the loan. So why don't you do that, right? So and I've lived with buddies, lived on the couch, done that thing. So it hasn't always been rainbows and kitten whiskers in my life, because people, they only see the highlights, right? Like, oh, you've traveled the world, you've entertained the troops stationed overseas, you've been on national television and all these achievements, but they don't necessarily pay attention to all the bad stuff that's happened. So I always like to say, if you're going to take advice from somebody, would you rather have the person that's fresh out of flight school or the guy that's crashed in the Alaskan wilderness and made his way back to civilization?
Right.
It's like, who would you want as your tour guide? Or the guy that survived the worst case possible, or the guy who everything went right with?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great response. And, I'll tell you what's very interesting about the response that you gave me, because it is not something that I had been able to translate out of what I was reading about you and I did read, not your entire book, but some of it. I found it kind of interesting, and I'm not the most positive person in the world. I'm trying to work on that personally, but I tend to look at things as a little bit of a devil's advocate. So it's funny that you had kind of introduced yourself that way, because one thing that I took note of is a statement that you made in your book, Think Like a Mind Reader. And it was, success is getting what you want. Happiness is liking what you get. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a big part of that is, even in the middle of all of it, right? The worst 3 or 4 years of my life, when I was really at rock bottom, I could bear like I had to borrow money from my buddy to get gas to go to interviews and that kind of thing. And then I got a job at a call center, and then they closed up shop literally overnight, owing me like $3,000, right? So it was a really bad spot in my life. But a big part of what makes it bearable is knowing that I'm responsible for it, right? I was making the choices that put me in those situations. And if you abdicate that responsibility, if you blame anybody else but yourself about anything, then you're giving up your ability to make a difference about it. So success is, oh yay, I've checked off all these boxes. But a lot of people design a life, well, they let a life happen, right? They don't sit down and actually design the outcomes that they want. So then they don't understand that they're the person responsible for staying in those situations that make them miserable. So my buddies, they just like, good Lord, man, you're in a really bad spot. You're technically homeless, but you're the happiest homeless person I've ever met in my life. Like, what in the world is your secret? How are you so positive about this? So to me, it's not just positive thinking, because that's trying to delude yourself into feeling a way about a situation that's actually awful, right? So you don't have to feel happy about the spot you're in, but knowing you can do something about it goes a long way to making it bearable.
Do you think that's a unique characteristic that you have, or do you think that's something that's teachable, learnable? What advice would you give? I mean, what advice would you give me? Like, let's say that I'm sitting here and I'm telling you, "Oh, Jonathan, I'm so miserable. I'm going through this thing in my life, and it's out of control, and I don't feel like I have any control over it." And I don't think that's uncommon. So, what would be your response? If we were sitting in a coffee shop and having that conversation.
Right. If you had paid me sufficient amounts of money to be honest with you, because
Understood. Right. Yeah.
honesty is insanely expensive.
Indeed.
It can cost you friendships, family, everything. So that's why coaches will often, pay me to be honest with you. So, if I were going to be honest with you, which I'm going to be now, that is a lovely story, right? It's a comforting story, and it makes sense, and it feels right that, you know what, I'm miserable and nothing is going right and it's not my fault. First of all, that's a comforting narrative. And I would look at, what's the history? Is this your standard operating procedure? Do
Mhm.
you like being in these problems because you understand them?
Okay.
So whether you say it's my nature or you're saying it's nurture, the experience is going to be exactly the same. So if you say it's my nature, that's a lovely excuse to not do anything that might change your situation.
Great
But
answer. Okay. All right.
if
But
if you allow if you allow yourself even the hypothetical that it's nurture, you might be empowered to make a difference about it and actually change your situation. So why don't you just hypothetically accept responsibility for it and maybe entertain the idea that your state of being is a strategy that you've been using for years to get your needs met? And this is the best strategy you have to feel significant, to maintain connections with people, because you know what? We love a pity party. We love to commiserate with other people that are in awful situations. So being in an awful situation is a really good strategy to feel important to other people. But it may not be the best strategy for yourself, and the best people in your life. So you might need to change your strategies and decision-making skills to make better choices to get better results.
And in your opinion, why do you think that it's so difficult or challenging for us to sort of, I mean, we could say adjust or control the way we look at things or change that, taking responsibility? You've obviously talked to millions of people, and I have to imagine things go through your own mind. And what goes through your mind? Why do you find that people have such a difficult time accepting that which you have very eloquently simplified for us?
What hand do you write with? What are you most comfortable using?
Oh, you're asking me? Oh, so I'm a
Yeah.
right-handed person.
All right. So your natural tendency, you were born right-handed. So that's how you do most stuff. So you've had a lifetime of using your right hand for most things. And then along comes this guy who goes, you know what? Your life will be better if you use your left hand. How resistant are you going to be? Right? Now, maybe he convinces you, you know what? Using my left hand will be better. With sufficient attention, dedication, and practice, and lots of conscious awareness, you could use your left hand for a lot of stuff. And then you can get really good at it. But for a long time, it's not going to feel natural. It's going to feel awkward, cumbersome. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're going to be frustrated. And you know what? Why am I even doing this? It's not worth it. Right? But even if you succeeded, even if you got used to it, say you're tired, say you're rushed, you're stressed, you've got a deadline, what's going to be the first thing you do? Well, you know what? For right now, I'm just going to use my right hand. You're just going to go right back to the way that you're used to doing it. So look at let's go to a time machine, right? And you go back to your childhood. You saw the way that your parents did things. You formulated beliefs about the way the world works based on your experiences when you were a kid. And then that installs your belief system that guides your decisions through adolescence and adulthood. And those choices create outcomes that further reinforce your beliefs about the world. So you've had a lifetime of operating in a particular way of thinking, acting, and believing, right? But then you think about it. You're a kid. You don't have really strong logical faculties. You don't have enough life experience to have a fully formed decision-making mindset on here's the best strategy to get what I want out of life. You're just believing what you've seen and then thinking, making the mistake that this is just the way the world works, right? So we most often look for experiences and evidence to support what we already believe instead of actively seeking for experiences and information that would disprove our belief structures. So really, it would take overhauling your entire way of being and thinking about the world to get different results. And holy cow, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah,
but
it does. Yeah.
it won't be worth it until you've destroyed your life, basically. Most people require their life to implode completely before they face up to the fact that, you know what, maybe this way of doing stuff isn't the best way to be doing it. Maybe there's a different way. What's out there? And then they usually find religion or a cult and then spend their life savings on that.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. So those are the options. That's what you're saying. You're saying, so once your life implodes,
those are the only options.
Yep, right. We should look for our favorite cult, the one we like, and or religion. And okay.
Speaking of which, let's join the Jonathan Pritchard cult. Chapters everywhere.
Right. By the way, this podcast is sponsored by the Jonathan Pritchard cult, coming to a town near you.
Yeah, I've always said if I didn't have scruples, I would start a cult. That would be so much fun. But
I mean,
I'm trying to be honest about it. Yeah. Cult of personality, okay.
Like you could. Yeah. You sort of come off like I could almost see that you could almost be introducing that.
Yeah, but when you see my picture, I don't have the cult eyes, right? Where you can see
Okay.
like I don't have those really intense guru eyes where he can see into my soul. Yeah, I don't have that.
Well, that's good. That's good. So, if you don't mind switching gears, and
Yeah.
I think that was a really awesome response, by the way. So, considering everything that we've talked about so far in the past, I guess 10, 12 minutes, I'm still like I'm trying to connect the dots between the mind reader
Mm-hmm.
and the way that you have sort of been eloquent about explaining ways of approaching problems. What is sort of the connection, or is there a connection? And then,
Oh yeah, it's the only connection,
oh,
really,
okay.
to me. So for folks out there in podcast land, I'm a for let's see, about 10 years or so full time. I traveled the world doing a mind reading show. Think of it like a magic show, but instead of doing tricks with objects and things like tigers and cages, I do tricks with information. So I tell people what street they grew up on, that kind of stuff. It's an interactive kind of 4-dimensional improv show where I bring volunteers up on stage and we have fun, and it's a great time. So I entertain the troops stationed in South Korea, did a 2-week tour there. I've performed on Vegas main stages on the Strip. Went out for America's Got Talent, got in front of the judges, got 3 out of 4 yeses. That was fun. Been out for Penn and Teller's show Fool Us, went out, filmed, and for reasons beyond my control, my segment didn't make it to air. Oh well. But I've known Penn and Teller for years. My mentor is James Randi, who for decades had $1 million challenge for anybody who claimed to have supernatural abilities. Well, he would say, if you can demonstrate it under scientific conditions where you can't cheat, then you get $1 million. So I handled applications for that $1 million challenge and designed testing protocol for it. So I saw every way that people were trying to scam their way to the money and thought, I can do these scams better than they can. And that's kind of how I got my start as a world traveling mentalist and mind reader. So the reason that I can stand on stage and convince a room full of logical human beings, so 3,000 people in that audience, I can convince them that I can read minds. It's not because I'm psychic, but it's because I'm a fantastic communicator, but also I understand fundamental human psychology of understanding the fundamental ways that people understand and navigate reality. And that is on a level that precedes culture or contextual relevance. And for that, I mean, most psychology research is done dependent on the culture of the person that you're studying. And most often, the human guinea pig for it is the college freshman, right? They don't have anything better to do. So let's go to this test. Right? So most of the bedrock psychology research that you're aware of is done with college kids. Now, I don't know how much time you spent on college campuses, but they're not necessarily the defining age range and mindset of humanity, right? So it's kind of a narrow sliver.
Fair.
So a lot of what we know as bedrock psychological principles are going through the replication crisis. We're redoing a lot of the studies that were done in the 70s, and it's the same results aren't happening. So it would be like, all right, you know what? We've known about Sir Isaac Newton's laws of thermodynamics, but you know what? Let's just test it again, and we're getting weird results, right? It would be that kind of, oh my God, what is going on? Change, right? Now, think of it this way. Magicians, shamans, as they were called before written history, have been doing magic since before we knew of history, right? Magicians can get that magical response. I don't care what culture you grew up in. When that cage is there, it's empty. I know it's empty. And then boom, there's a tiger in it. Holy crap, that's amazing, right? It doesn't matter where you grew up. That's impossible. So the only way that magicians and mentalists can do what they do is they understand how humans navigate reality and then sidejack that process to get them to believe wrong things. And in the context of a magic show, that's okay. But in any other context, we call those people liars and cheats and scam artists. So that's why my mentor, Randy, would always say, I'm an honest liar. I'm going to tell you I'm going to lie to you. And then I do. And that's what makes it okay. Right? So think of it also like, imagine you're a painter and you want to paint photorealistic images. How do you do it? Well, first, you have to study the object that you're going to paint. Say it's a Coke can. If you're going to paint that Coke can, you need to study it exactly down to its smallest detail. You have to examine it. And then you'll discover, you know what? This is a thing I've been familiar with every day of my life, but I've never really looked at it. I've never really examined it. I've never noticed that detail before. So it's only by studying those details can you then even start to replicate it in your painting. And then you need to have phenomenal painting skills, the physical skills of being able to look at reality and then paint something that matches it exactly. But if you think about it, that painting is not the reality of that Coke can. It's an image of the Coke can, right? It's not real. So you can't drink the painting, right? But it can show you details about reality that are worth knowing. So that's why magicians and mentalists have to study how people interact, how they think, how they form beliefs about the world. They have to understand that fundamentally before they can then leverage that process to create illusions that aren't real, but the experiences are meaningful. So the psychology that I'm using on stage to make people believe I can read minds isn't supernatural. It's just phenomenal communication skills and information management. That's all it is. The right thing at the right time. So over the years, I started to realize, holy crap, this psychology I've used on stage and in my own life to get to tour the world and do all these things is exactly what all these business gurus are talking about, but they can only talk about stories that happened to somebody else. They can't demonstrate these principles in real time in a way that involves the audience in the same way that I can. All right, now I need to share this with the world. So that's what made me transition. I still do the performing, but I shifted focus to being a speaker and a keynote speaker on the psychology of a negotiation or sales process or marketing, influence, that kind of fun stuff. And then also teaming up with companies to teach their teams and do 2-day training workshops where I actually show people how to do this stuff and how it applies into their particular context, because it's universal human psychology just applied to their box or their domain of expertise, right?
Sure.
So it's fundamental human psychology, and that's why it's so applicable to so many different areas. And it's just that most people don't have the experience. They haven't spent 45,000 hours of their life thinking about this stuff to really understand why it applies to dating, to self-confidence, to their family life, to money, to whatever it is. So that's why I'm on a personal campaign to help people understand how big an impact your mindset and fundamental human psychology has on the quality life that you live. And if you never practice these skills, you're going to default to what you have believed about the world your whole life, even if it may not be the most effective strategy to get what it is that you want.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing from you say is, if we break it down to a word, it's really bad habits, right? So people have bad habits. Would you agree with that or disagree?
People have habits.
People have
And
habits. Yes.
yes, and they are effective or ineffective. The
Right.
extent to which they negatively impact themselves or their friends is the degree to which they're good or bad. But I like to look at it as effective or ineffective, because a lot of what you think is a bad habit is highly effective at getting what it is that you want. And that's why you reinforce that behavior, because it's effective. But
Right.
it might cause misery in yourself. It might cause misery in your friends and your family and the people you care about. So that's why I say that's what a bad habit is, even if it's effective.
I understand
Right?
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Let's take a quick break. Hey, everybody. Jeremy again. Listen, I want to just grab your attention for 1 minute. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I want to tell you about the podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, you might want to check out our premiere episode with Jason Eric Ross.
And I was in a very difficult point in my life in terms of where I was going with career. Something in my gut told me to call this man and check if he was okay. My career went in a very different path after that day.
Jason takes us on a little journey.
You covered pretty much everything.
We talk about things like parenting.
We live in a social media-driven, tech-driven society.
Social behaviors.
I think attitudes have changed. The energy, or the zeitgeist as they would call it, has changed.
Frustration tolerance.
The brain is different.
And society.
And how much we're willing to challenge our belief system is a form of emotional intelligence. At the end of the day, you're as good as your coping skills. It's the reality of life. We have a much more self-medicated society.
Also, coming up next week, we speak to Fred Stubeck.
The way the book is put together was not by serendipity or accident, that the first chapter is belief specifically.
Fred Stubeck is a fantastically successful man.
If you do not believe in yourself, it's going to be difficult for other people to believe in you.
He's had a crazy journey.
Life is not always an upward trajectory.
He's written a great book.
There has to be a good fit for what you're doing.
And he comes on the podcast and talks to us about things like
a child, you can talk about nature versus nurture all you want. And I'll put my money on nurture most of the time.
Again, I hope you guys are really enjoying this. Stay tuned. Let's get right back to the podcast. Meanwhile, getbetterpodcast.com. Subscribe, listen, download iTunes, Google Play, and let's get better. So if we could just switch gears really quick, and, I know you probably haven't listened to any other episodes of the podcast. Again, we're just starting out, so I wouldn't have expected that. But we talk a lot about communication, and especially in terms of problem solving. And it is absolutely obvious to me that your communication skills and the kind of the message that you're also sending to people through your talks and, performances, they're very much based around communication. Identifying those details. Could you tell me, first of all, what I'd like to know, and I kind of think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway, how important is communication in terms of problem solving? And then I don't want you to give me I don't want you to give us the recipe, but I would love for you to tell me, what are some things that we could start thinking about in terms of communicating that could improve something in our lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, in terms of communication, here's what I would say: the most powerful invisible force in your life are your relationships. Your relationship to yourself, to your problems, to your resources, to your friends, to your romantic partners, to your family, to your job, everything. Relationships are the most powerful force in a human being's life. The quality of that relationship is predicated on the quality of your communication skills. Most people confuse talking with communicating. Just because you can say words doesn't mean you're a phenomenal communicator. And the biggest problem with communication is the illusion of it happening. Right? How many times have you ever had a really serious argument or discussion with your romantic partner, your sweetie, your girlfriend, or whatever, and you finally man, we made it through it. I'm so glad that we both agree that this. And then they go, what in the world are you talking about? That's not at all what I'm saying. And you just wasted 4 hours of your life and you thought you were done. And the real fight is just beginning. Right. So
Definitely. Yeah.
oftentimes the fundamental mistake with communication isn't so much the other person not hearing you. It's that you're not communicating in a way that helps them understand. And you assume you understand the problem, but what winds up happening is you're trying to solve the wrong problem. So no wonder the problem doesn't go away. You're actually addressing the symptoms of the problem instead of changing the root cause of it. So the reason why your relationships are bad isn't necessarily because you're with a bad person, but you may not understand your fundamental principles and life philosophy to the point of understanding who would be a good match for you. And you're choosing to continue that relationship. You are the only common denominator to all of your bad relationships. So it's a function of the quality of your own understanding of your own needs, wants, and desires, and a function of your skills at having your needs met, and then your ability to communicate those things to the people in your life who would either want that or not want that, so that you attract the right people and push away the right people.
So how would one improve that? Because I mean, I think what you said just now is applicable to all of us. We've all had those arguments. We've all had relationships that didn't work out in some format. What's a general approach? Because I don't think everyone could take every relationship in their life and evaluate it to the point of putting that much effort into being microscopic about it. I think on some level, you have to accept, right?
Everything takes a lot of effort up front.
Right.
Everything worth doing feels impossible when you start doing it. And if your life isn't worth that much effort, if you aren't worth putting in that effort to yourself, why the hell is anybody else going to put that effort into you? So if you don't take that microscopic look at your whole life, nobody else will. You have to think and believe in your core that you're worth that effort. And then you have to demonstrate that effort yourself. And I'm living proof that a life with that much effort and examination is worth living. And it's possible. And it's not just because I'm lucky. It's not because I was born this way, because I've done it the wrong way a lot. And I was born, I'm super introverted. Everybody goes, oh, well, it's easy for you to be a performer because you're just so good at it. Well, I wasn't born good at performing. I was intensely shy. I hate talking to people. But I realized that I could identify as introverted, never talk to anybody, and never get anything that I want. But I saw that the outgoing people who could speak up for themselves, who could ask for what they want, were the people who wound up getting it. So if I want to be successful in life, I'm going to need to advocate for my own success. I'm going to literally have to stand up and speak for what I want. So I'm going to have to learn to be a good presenter and be a good communicator. So then I forced myself to learn to do it by going into the debate team, to put myself in situations that were intentionally uncomfortable and force myself to translate the images that I see in my mind into words that I can use to communicate with people. None of this is natural to me. It's just that I've spent my life working on it. So if anybody goes, well, it's easy for you because X, that's their excuse that they believe is relevant enough to make them not have to put in the work.
Would you say mindfulness plays a role in like the ability to also understand what other people are thinking or what's on their minds, or as a person trying to find maybe or enhance a relationship with somebody else. Do you find that statement or that word mindfulness useful at all in terms of what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you start to develop a lot of compassion for people when you see them struggling and you go, the answer is so clear to me. Like, but then you realize it's because I've spent time doing the work,
Mhm.
right? I've specifically dived into this and spent time discovering it. And it's perfectly clear and obvious to me, but it's a total obscure mystery to them. So that's why I always like to think you're the magician of your own life, right? So think of it. You're either the audience or the magician. So to the audience, the magician is capable of doing the impossible. I know that's not possible, but there it is. I'm seeing him do it. There's no way I could do that. And that's an audience member mindset. Or you could think like a magician. You could think like a mind reader. And all it is, it's a difference in strategy. Once you understand the real problem, you can develop effective strategies that will get you the results that you want in the way that you want them. And to other people, it will look impossible. But then once you understand the inner workings of the human mind, it's all laid bare. It all makes sense. You go, I understand it better than you do, right? So oftentimes the reason I disagree with people isn't because I don't understand their position. It's that I understand their position better than they do.
Ouch.
And that's when you develop a lot of compassion for people. You go, I understand you're hurting. I understand that you're in a lot of pain. I'm not begrudging you that. I'm not angry at you. I have sympathy for you. I have compassion for your way of being. And the only way that I can help you is by living the best life I can live as an example that it's possible. But if you try to force people to change, that's a recipe for making yourself go crazy, right? There's that saying, pearls before swine, for a reason. They haven't had enough life experience to come to the realization themselves that, you know what, this isn't the right way to be doing things. So you can't make anybody change. You can just show them the path. They have to walk it. So mindfulness is essential, but another big problem is most folks can't define it. They don't know what mindfulness is. It's a beautiful buzzword. It sounds good. They think they know what that means, but what is it, right? Like, what would be your definition of mindfulness?
Yeah, I mean, agreed. And that's sort of why I was asking the question, because a lot of people have a different definition for what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And it plays into so many other things. So,
right. So to me, it's a mindfulness is a function of understanding the physics of the human mind, like understanding how it works, its causes and effects, and a function of the awareness of how it works and ability to maintain calm in relationship with that awareness.
Okay.
So it's a function of understanding and lack of emotional triggers in relationship with what it is that you're discovering.
Right.
Right. Because most people go, oh, ignorance is bliss. It's like, no, that which you're not aware of can kill you. Right.
That's
so if
true.
You're ignorant of how your mind works, you might be calm, but you might be unaware of a huge mental mindset issue that's keeping you in a bad relationship or whatever it is that is bringing you lots of stress. You may not even be aware of the mindset that's causing it to happen. Right. So discovering and being aware of how your mind works is kind of step one. And then being able to maintain calm while you're aware of these really stressful things, that will then enable you to make better choices. But you have to be able to maintain calm and be aware at the same time, not one or the other at the expense of either.
Hmm. That makes perfect sense. Easy to say, hard to do. Absolutely.
Mhm.
But it definitely makes sense what you're saying. So taking all of this into consideration and taking, your entire life's work, all the things that you've done, all the people you've spoken to, sort of the challenges you've seen and that other people have. Why would you say all this is really important to you? Or what have you taken away from this, from what you're doing?
The reason why it's important is I I destroyed my life making choices
Mhm.
based on certain beliefs that weren't serving me. So I've seen the impact that not paying attention to this stuff can have. And I also realized that on the positive side, I was able to figure out and craft a life that actually fits me to a T. And it's not because I was born to money, wasn't because I was born into anything else. It's like my dad worked in factories until the day he retired. My mom still works as a secretary. We grew up in a single wide trailer on a dirt road in the mountains of North Carolina, far away from a city or from anywhere with lots of opportunity. It's like every other business on Main Street was boarded up. That's where I grew up. And I had to figure it out. So from there, I've learned to transform my time into money and value that other people are willing to pay for so that I have full control over my time. I don't have a boss that can tell me where to be and when to be there and how long to be there. I don't have one person that can fire me. I don't have one person that's in control of my finances. I don't have one person that can tell me to go away from my family, right? Nobody else controls me. Nobody else can tell me who to have in my life. If there's somebody that doesn't have my best interests at heart and who's actively causing negative impact in my life, I never have to see them ever again. I have so much control over my time, my attention, myself, and the results of how I spend my time that I'm free. To me, that's real freedom. Not having anybody else be able to tell me how to spend my time. And that is what true freedom is. And most people think of freedom as having lots of money, but the strategy they have to get it means that they're trapped by their success. They have to show up and trade their time for dollars. They have a job that they hate. Their coworkers are awful. They're miserable. They're always belly aching. They have to sacrifice their health in order to do it. Sure, I made a lot of money, but now I've put on 45 pounds. You know what? I've been there. I got married, I got fat, I got divorced, I got fatter, right? So I was miserable all the time and I wasn't healthy. And sacrificing my health in exchange for dollars isn't worth it. So there are better ways to do things. And that's why, to me, I have a moral obligation to share this stuff with people because I see how much pain that they're in and how clearly why it is that they're in that pain. And they believe that there's no better way. They believe that this is the best way. And I want to challenge those beliefs so that they can open up, so they can live a better life, a life of freedom, of where they want to be, who they have in their life, and not be controlled by anybody else but themselves. And if you haven't spent a life learning how to do that, that sounds impossible, but it's only because you don't understand how that works. That's the only difference. It's not because you were born this way and it will never change. It's just a difference in strategies. That's all it is. So that it's tough love saying you're responsible for this. You've made the choices that made the experiences that you're having. It's your fault, but it's also in your control. You can do something about it. You can make better changes if you understand how to develop better strategies. So it's tough to hear, but it's liberating when you understand it.
How many people that you run into or in your life have that same ability to think the way you do? Because, and I'll tell you why I'm asking. I just find it,
Mm-hmm.
I find it hard to fathom that many people sort of, not that they don't want to share the way that you're thinking, but have the ability to. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
it would be fairly unique. So I'd love to ask that question. How many folks in your life, or how many people have you encountered that are sort of on that same level that you
Right. On a percentage basis,
are?
all of them.
Okay.
All of
Okay.
them. Everybody
Okay.
in my life is awesome like that, right? Because none of us have to be in each other's lives. We all choose who's in our life. Nobody in my life has to be around anybody else because they're all free. So those are the only people that are in my life, are world-class, amazing thinkers, doers, creators, artists, performers, entrepreneurs, investors. I only have world-class friends and connections and relationships. Now, in
Wow.
terms
Yeah.
of empirical numbers, like quantifying that, how many of them? Very few. Right? It's that kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Every domain of expertise, the more capable you get, the fewer people there are at that level. So most people you meet on a day-to-day basis, if you just walked around a city, most people don't think the way that I think. And that's why I have that calling to share my ways of thinking, because they aren't natural. They don't come easy. They don't make sense from most people's viewpoint.
Yeah. And again, that was sort of my reasoning for the question, because I would imagine that it's got to sometimes for you be difficult to sort of operate in this world of people pretty much not having your mindset whatsoever, if at all. And you having already recognized that. And that's sort of why what you do is so valuable. But for the average Joe that bumps into you, he has no idea the way that you look at life and things. And maybe you're just at, ordering a coffee and he gets it wrong. Do you
Right,
react
yeah.
like everyone else? Or, I'm curious.
Right. It's easy to talk about it, but one of my favorite things is my sweetie, my girlfriend. It's kind of weird being a life coach and here's the way to do things, right? And then have your girlfriend be in the background rolling her eyes going, "Ugh, I know from experience that he's just full of crap," because right? Okay, he's going to play the part.
You said it, I didn't. So,
Yeah.
okay.
But really this isn't an act. It's not a put on. It's my everyday. This is how I am. This is how I've worked really hard to be. So the common way most people experience this are, oh, you know what? I'm not flexible. That's why I'm not going to do yoga. Oh, I could never go to the gym. I can't lift weights. Right? It's a fundamental misunderstanding of cause and effect. It's like you go to yoga to get stronger and more mobility, right? You're not going to get flexible and then do yoga. You have to do the thing that gets you the thing before you can have it, right? So it's not. It's just people are fundamentally confused about how the way the way the world works, right? So
Yeah.
so what really got me started on this was doing college shows. So I've done thousands of shows at colleges across the country. So like I said, I've connected with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people on a one-on-one basis. I've met more of humanity than most humanity ever will. And after doing my comedy mind reading show where we're being silly and I help them forget their problems for an hour, which is a calling in and of itself. Well, at the end of the hour, I want to sign autographs. I want to meet people right? Connect with my audience. I'm like, yeah, let's sign autographs. I'll be here until the last person leaves. And then it happened all the time. These college kids would go, man, you're living the dream. You're getting to travel the world. You're getting paid for it. I can't even imagine doing that. And that was the magic phrase for me. I can't even imagine doing something like that. Now, if you can't even imagine a different reality, how in the world are you going to make it real? Right? That's impossible. So I started talking to people. Well, you know what? I grew up a poor kid. There were some days where it was my parents had to make the insanely tough choice between gas money and my lunch money. Like those are facts and decisions that my parents had to own up to. And that is a really tough spot to be in. I never want anybody to be in that situation. But that's where I grew up. That's the experience I went through. And I've made it. I made it out. Right. So here's how I think about things. Here's how I make decisions. Here's how I own up to it. Here's how I accept my power, that kind of thing. Then a year or two after I start talking about that kind of stuff with people, I start getting emails back. Hey, thank you so much for taking that time to talk to me. It made all the difference in the world. Holy cow, here's why things are better. I can't thank you enough. And that's when it dawned on me that the way I think about things is valuable, that I could have meaningful, positive impact in the lives of the people that I connect with. And the more people I can connect with, the more positive impact I can have, which means those people can be a better person and build better relationships with everybody that they come in contact with. So the best way that I can help the world is to help as many people as I can think about their lives in a different way that they never would have thought about on their own. So that's when I had the calling to start sharing my thoughts, ideas, strategies, mindsets, experience, all that stuff. So that's why the same 20 conversations started cropping up. And that's why I wrote the book. I crammed those 20 conversations, those 20 principles, those 20 things that kept coming up again and again and again, which seemed to be the most important because they were the most frequent. So I put all of my ideas into that book. So now I can help people without me having to physically be there. Right. So that's the best place to get started, is to dig into the book, and you can use it as a prop to do a mind reading trick on your friends. And that's in there for a reason, because that's what helps you get better at communicating. Learn a magic trick, because you'll understand very quickly that doing the right thing the right way at the right time isn't enough. You have to do it exactly the right way. Right. So I did all the moves. I said all the right things, but it didn't work. They weren't impressed. It's like, well, you got to do it the right way. You got to cultivate those skills through practice. So it's the practice of learning how to do that mind reading trick really well that will show you how to become a better communicator.
That's really interesting. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. I mean, you've spent a lot of time with me today. So the last question I just wanted to ask, and you might have already sort of answered it, and I don't even know if it's applicable, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What's something that you think is true that nobody agrees with you on?
Ooh.
It's kind of a tough one. I know.
Yeah. One is I have my favorite crackpot theory that I love, which is everything's black holes, right? Protons are black holes, like the whole thing. I love that. And my sweetie's a science communicator, and it drives her crazy. And to me, it's just hilarious to do that. So that's one of those beliefs that has absolutely zero impact on my life. So it's fun to believe it, whether or not it's true. In another way is I believe in the law of cause and effect, that the world is knowable, that you can discover it through logic and reason, and that you can be in charge of the choices that you make. And most people don't. Most people will say that they totally agree with, oh, yeah, my actions have consequences, but they behave in ways that are exactly opposite exactly like I was talking about. Oh, I'm not flexible. I could never do yoga. Right. So they will say one thing, but they will do something that is completely opposite, which proves that they don't believe it.
Way to pull that back in. I like it. That was really good. And that's a great answer, because
it's like I'm a professional communicator or something.
It's almost like you are a professional. Oh my God. Listen, I wanted to say, I can't tell you how much value I felt that this interview created. And I want to thank you again for taking your time.
My pleasure. And I always like to answer that with, the best thank you is making better choices.
Yeah, well, we're all working on that, right? So I'm definitely, certainly somebody who has to probably make better choices. But yeah, I will be listening to this interview probably 1,000 times before it airs, because post-production takes a while. And that's usually when I get a good chance to really hear and listen. So interestingly enough, I end up listening to the podcast probably many, many more times than anybody else ever will, collectively even.
Perhaps. Oh, yeah. I
had
a podcast for like 63 episodes or so. I intimately understand and empathize with that experience. It's like, oh my God, I get to listen to myself again. Oh my God, here we go. So yeah, I get it.
It's part of the experience though, right? It is what it is. So you accept to do it, and you commit to it, and you do it. That's all.
Exactly. It's worth time, or it isn't.
Exactly. But listen, Jonathan, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It meant the world to me. It does mean the world to me. I will probably reach out to you, if it's okay with you, when we go to air. And one more time, just thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to connect with everybody out there in podcast land. And you folks out there listening, if you want to connect, find me at likeamindreader.com. There you can find all the training, the books, links to me on Twitter, _Pritchard, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm disgustingly easy to get a hold of with asynchronous communication dynamics.
Okay. Asynchronous communication dynamics, everybody. Jonathan, thanks again. Listen, have a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
My pleasure. You got it. See ya.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Get Better Podcast. Make sure you visit our website, getbetterpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS. And this way you'll never miss a show. And while you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply just tell a friend about the show, that would really help us out too. If you did enjoy the show, you also might want to check out the show notes on the website. Jonathan Pritchard is available for private coaching, mentoring, and also corporate events. You can grab a copy of his book, How to Think Like a Mind Reader, and I'll be sure to include links to John's website and social media handles. I'll see you all next week. Thanks again.